My brother tried to sell my car to cover his debts after he gambled away our parents' house. When my husband stepped in to stop him, it sparked a family conflict that uncovered even more shocking secrets. Hello everyone, I never thought I would be sharing this story, but after everything that has happened, I feel like I need to get it all out. My brother and I grew up close, at least that's how it seemed when we were kids. He was always the reckless one, charming his way out of trouble while I played it safe. As we got older, those differences became more obvious. I built a stable life with my husband, while my brother made one bad decision after another. I tried to help him many times, but nothing could have prepared me for what he did next. It all started when my brother got deep into gambling. At first, he kept it hidden, passing it off as casual fun. But soon, the losses piled up, and it became clear he was in way over his head. He started borrowing money, first from friends, then from family, then from anyone who would lend to him. My parents, ever the enablers, refused to believe he had a real problem. They bailed him out a few times, convinced he just needed one more chance to turn things around. I warned them it wouldn't stop, but they wouldn't listen. Then, the unimaginable happened. My brother, desperate and drowning in debt, gambled away my parents' house. The home we grew up in. The place they had worked their whole lives to pay off. Gone in one reckless bet. He didn't even tell them right away. He waited until there was no way out, until the papers were signed and the house was legally no longer theirs. My parents were devastated. My mother cried for days. My father, usually a quiet and proud man, looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. And my brother? He had the audacity to act like he was the victim. I was furious. I confronted him, demanding to know what the hell he was thinking. He gave excuse after excuse. He thought he could win it back, he had a plan, he didn't mean for this to happen. It was all bullshit. He didn't care about the consequences, only about getting his next fix. I told him he needed to take responsibility, to find a way to make things right. He just scoffed, saying there was nothing he could do now. My parents, despite everything, couldn't bring themselves to cut him off. That's when he made his next move, one that nearly pushed me over the edge. I came home one evening to find my husband pacing in the driveway, looking like he was ready to explode. "Your brother just tried to sell your car," he said, his voice tight with anger. My heart stopped. What? I barely got the word out. He called a guy to come look at it. Had the title ready, probably forged. If I hadn't been here, he might have actually gotten away with it. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My car was in my name. It had nothing to do with my brother, yet he thought he could take it just like that? After what he did to our parents, now he was coming after me. I stormed inside, shaking with rage. My brother was sitting on my couch, as if he belonged there, as if he hadn't just tried to steal from me. "Get out," I snapped. He looked up lazily, as if I was the one being unreasonable. "Relax. It didn't go through. Are you out of your mind? You tried to sell my car." My voice was rising, but I didn't care. I needed the money. His tone was so casual, like he was talking about borrowing a few dollars instead of committing a crime. "I would have paid you back." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You would have paid me back? With what?" "More lies." He rolled his eyes. "It's not like you need the car that bad." That was it. I lunged at him, and my husband had to step between us. "You're done," I hissed. "You've stolen from our parents, and now you think you can steal from me? I don't care what happens to you anymore. Get out of my house and don't come back." For the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, maybe fear, maybe realization that he had finally pushed too far. But instead of apologizing, instead of showing even a hint of remorse, he sneered. "Fine. You never cared about family anyway." I was shaking as I watched him walk out. My husband pulled me into his arms, trying to calm me down, but I was too angry, too hurt. My own brother had betrayed me in a way I never imagined possible. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I could finally cut ties and move on. But I was wrong. My brother wasn't done. And when my husband stepped in to stop him, things escalated in ways none of us could have expected. I thought that kicking my brother out would be the end of it. That I could finally breathe, that I wouldn't have to deal with his lies, his recklessness, his destruction anymore. But I should have known better. I should have known that someone who could gamble away our parents' house and then try to sell my car wouldn't just walk away quietly. For a few days, things were eerily silent. My parents, still reeling from their own loss, didn't reach out. I figured they were finally seeing him for who he really was. My husband and I tried to move on, but there was this constant unease in the air, like the moment before a storm. And then, just when I thought things had settled, my brother made his next move. It started with a phone call from my mother, her voice shaky and desperate. "He's saying he's going to the police," she blurted out the moment I answered. I frowned. "What?" "For what?" "For you," she said. "He's saying you stole from him. That you forged his signature and took money that was his." I almost laughed. It was so absurd, so ridiculous. "Are you serious?" "He says he has proof," she continued, her words tumbling over each other. "He says he's going to press charges if you don't give him the car or," she hesitated. "Or what, Mom?" I snapped. "Or give him money." I closed my eyes, my blood boiling. I had known my brother was desperate, but this was a new low, even for him. "And you believe him?" She was silent for a moment, and that silence hurt more than anything else. "I don't know what to believe," she finally whispered. I gritted my teeth. "Well, let me make it easy for you. He's lying. He's manipulating you because he knows you'll bend for him. And I'm not giving him a damn thing. But if he goes to the police, let him." I shouted, unable to control myself. "Let him go. Let him dig himself into a deeper hole. I don't care anymore." I hung up, my hands shaking. My husband, who had been listening from across the room, walked over and pulled me into his arms. "He's getting desperate," he murmured. "That means he's running out of options." But my brother wasn't done yet. The next day, I woke up to find our front yard trashed. Garbage thrown across the lawn. My mailbox smashed in. And spray-painted across our garage door, in large, red letters, "Thief." I felt like I couldn't breathe. My stomach twisted, my heart pounded in my chest. My husband's face darkened as he stepped forward, already pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the police." I grabbed his arm. "It's what he wants." "He's escalating," my husband said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "You think this is going to stop here?" I didn't. I knew my brother. He was spiraling. And spiraling people don't stop until they crash. The police came. They took pictures, asked questions. But they couldn't do much without proof that it was him. My husband installed cameras that same day, but I knew my brother wasn't done. And I was right. That night, my mother called again, crying. "He's here," she sobbed. "He's saying he has nowhere to go. He's begging us to let him stay." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Mom, he says you lied about him," she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. "That you set him up. That he only gambled the house because you convinced him it was a good idea." I actually laughed at that. A hollow, bitter laugh. "Do you hear yourself? Do you even hear how insane that sounds?" "He's my son," she whispered. "I don't know what to do." "He is manipulating you," I said slowly, making sure every word cut through. "He is twisting everything so you'll feel sorry for him. And if you let him stay, he will ruin you." She cried harder, and I hated myself for feeling even an ounce of guilt. That night, my husband and I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow made my pulse spike. And then, at 3 a.m., the doorbell rang. My husband was out of bed instantly. "Stay here," he ordered. Like hell I was going to stay. I followed him downstairs, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. He checked the camera feed and stiffened. "It's him." I clenched my fists. "I'm calling the police." My husband hesitated. "Let's see what he wants first." I swallowed my anger and nodded. He opened the door just enough to block the entrance. My brother stood there, disheveled, his eyes wild. "Come on, man," he said, his voice slurring slightly. "I just want to talk." "Talk from there," my husband said coldly. My brother sighed dramatically, running a hand through his messy hair. "You guys are making a big deal out of nothing. Look, I'll make you a deal. My stomach twisted. We're not interested. He ignored me. You give me 20 grand, and I'll be out of your life for good. I laughed. You think we're going to pay you to disappear? Hey, he said, raising his hands. I'm trying to be reasonable. You trashed our yard. You spray painted our house. You threatened me with the police. My voice shook with fury. And you think we're just going to hand you money? His face twisted, the fake charm dropping. I deserve it, he snapped. After everything this family put me through, my husband slammed the door in his face. The next day, my parents called again. He's saying he's going to do something drastic, my mother said, her voice trembling. I think he really means it this time. I was exhausted. Done. But something in her voice, something raw, something terrified, made me pause. And I realized this wasn't over. It was only getting worse. And when my husband stepped in to finally put an end to it, everything exploded. I should have known my brother wouldn't stop. Not after the threats, the vandalism, and the blackmail attempts. But even after everything, I didn't expect what happened next. The day after my mother's frantic call, my husband and I decided we couldn't wait any longer. We need to end this, he said, his voice firm. Your parents aren't going to stop him. The cops won't do anything until he actually hurts someone. We have to be the ones to shut him down. I hated that it had come to this, but he was right. We drove straight to my parents' house, knowing full well my brother would be there. When we arrived, he was sitting on their front steps, a smug grin on his face, as if he had already won. My mother stood behind him, pale and exhausted, while my father looked away, ashamed. I didn't waste time. This ends today. My brother scoffed. Oh, yeah? And what exactly do you plan to do? My husband stepped forward. We're filing charges. His voice was cold, unshaken. For trespassing, for vandalism, for attempted fraud. We have proof, and we're done playing games. For the first time, my brother's smirk faltered. You wouldn't. I crossed my arms. Try me. He glanced at our parents, as if expecting them to defend him. But for once, they were silent. My mother looked at me with tears in her eyes, but she didn't argue. That's when my brother snapped. You think you're better than me? He spat. You always have, haven't you? Miss Perfect. Miss Responsible. He pointed at my husband. And you, acting like you have any right to threaten me? This is family business. You should have stayed out of it. My husband didn't even flinch. You stopped being family the moment you gambled away your parents' house and tried to steal from your own sister. My brother laughed a hollow, bitter sound. Then, without warning, he lunged at my husband. It happened so fast. 1 second, my brother was standing there, spewing venom. The next, he was swinging his fist. But my husband was ready. He dodged effortlessly, and when my brother tried again, my husband shoved him back with enough force to send him stumbling to the ground. Enough, my father's voice boomed. It was the first time he had spoken, and it froze all of us in place. He looked at my brother, his face hard, unreadable. You're not welcome here anymore. My brother blinked. What? You heard me, my father said. We're done. You have taken everything from us and still, it's not enough. You're not our son anymore. For the first time, real fear flickered in my brother's eyes. He turned to my mother. Mom? She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I love you, but I can't save you anymore. It was over. My brother looked at all of us, realization sinking in. He had lost. Not just his home, not just our money. He had lost us. He didn't argue, didn't fight. He just stood up, dusted himself off, and walked away without another word. That was the last time I saw him. In the weeks that followed, my parents moved into a smaller apartment, trying to rebuild what they could. They were devastated, but deep down, I think they felt relief too. My husband and I went back to our lives, finally free from the chaos my brother had brought into it. We heard rumors. He was bouncing from place to place, still gambling, still making bad choices. A few times, he tried to reach out to my parents, but they didn't cave. They had finally learned. As for me, I had already said my goodbye. Because family is supposed to love you, but they're also supposed to respect you. And if they don't, sometimes the hardest, but best thing you can do is walk away.